That's great. Have I still got you there? I just suddenly went dead.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, okay. I was afraid we've dropped. Okay, so he goes on to ask about, he's I think obviously he's looked into this, doing something to do with what he's calling a trade name. He's, again, Canada. Alberta and British Columbia require fingerprints, a photo ID, passport, birth certificate, etc. And the new name must be spelled in the Roman style. All of the other provinces and territories have the same process as the U.S. What can people in Alberta and British Columbia do? Do you know what he's saying there? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure because he says, and the new name must be spelled in the Roman style. So I don't know what new name he's referring to. And so ultimately I would say, yeah, there will be and is an answer to any obstacle or roadblock, and we've had to deal with a lot of them, and we've come through. And, you know, ultimately once you really see the full picture, then you have a decoder ring that you can figure out how the system is requiring you to do something. And that's why in the beginning of our call here, I started by saying, look at the perfection of the system, not as our enemy, but as something that we could get our whole awareness around, integrate the puzzle pieces, and then start understanding how to direct it. So, yeah, there are some places that are more problematic than others. I will also say there are some individual cases and circumstances where you're not going to pull some of the elements of what you have in your current life through the eye of the needle. You know, there are people I have to say to, you know what, no, I can't rescue that piece for you, and I can't tell you how you can do it. You are going to have to drop it. You know, there's people who are holding on to the security of certain things, or their jobs or whatever. In some instances, you can bring that through and reconfigure it. In other instances, you have to just let it go, and there's no getting around it. But in terms of this kind of thing, there is, you know, what I'm kind of seeing in the way he wrote this is that there's a problem with using these things, photo ID or the BC or the passport, to get something where it's in the old thinking of, okay, I'm not going to do any of that. I'm not going to use those things because they create attachment. Everything we do with status correction ultimately rearranges that, and it's not a problem. They are not then continuing as an attachment because you have done everything to change the record and rearrange your relationship to it. So most likely there's no problem here.
Right, yes, just getting the right information and to do all the right things to get yourself in the right status and standing. So it'll all be revealed in time, all of this. So we're going back now to travel. Zeke's in Australia. He's sent 3 lovely questions. Does Aotearoa issue recognized passports for international travel for its members? That's an interesting
the answer is no.
Okay.
We don't have standing or authority to do that. Of course, we can create private documents, and we do use alternative forms of ID. For example, there's the most well-known called the World Service Authority, and they issue passports and other ID. And are you familiar with that?
Yes, I have actually applied for the World Passport and the ID.
Right. And there's a man who's a film producer that my wife and I met a few years ago who created a fabulous documentary about Gary Davis, who founded that and his life history, which is pretty amazing, coming out of World War II and what he did to create that. And from the 50s to the 90s, he pioneered and broke a lot of ground where a lot of countries were actually accepting it. But then, of course, the system kind of trumped, locked in, tightened up, chomped in with their teeth, to where now it is harder to cross borders. People still do it. It's a hassle because you have to go to a consulate or you got to write to them and get it all done ahead of time. It's not as easy as just walking across borders with a U.S. passport. But also where we're at with that is we do use U.S. passports, but we configure the application, and there's a large document that we have that's an addendum that keeps the separation of the identity and status on the record. And then in the very end of the process, there's another thing that is done that will convert the database system to our benefit in regards to identifying our status, in which case then you can do the things that normally we have been thinking, you can't do. And I can't go into that any further, but so the answer to the question is no, we don't have passports in the interim. We use the World Service Passport as an alternative ID. Certainly don't have driver's licenses. And it's also a matter of education. There's a question further on down the list here about dealing with the people in the system. And it's all about, they're all just human beings trying to survive, keep things together, doing what they think they're supposed to do, but we are able to educate them, and slowly and steadily they're shifting to where they're being educated as to, no, you're programming about seeing me as a this and this, and surely I can't give you this alternative ID. That's breaking down. So that's, again, numbers is important. The more we do this and the more we maintain a stable position of being at peace rather than at war with the system, then we work with people and we educate them. And I have found, especially in the last several years with this advanced knowledge that we have in integration of things compared to the way it was 10, 20 years ago, it was a very big, when I started 20, 25 years ago, it was actually pretty easy. People were not programmed the way they are now. But post 9/11, it got into a period where, everybody saw communists and terrorists around every corner. But that's breaking down. People are really opening up. I'm finding that working with people at the post office and the banks and other places that, they have their programming, but there are people who are opening up and they're open to being educated with, and so we are making that difference. Right,
absolutely. It's important. So the next question, which is an interesting one to me as well, how do members acquire land, formerly real estate, for future communities?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's not formally real estate because they're two distinct things. Real estate is the royal estate. So that's the global titling system, which is lifted off the land, which is fictional in nature, everything that we've talked about, the fictional corporate reality versus the substance of life as land and human bodies and animals, plants, rivers, and all the rest of that. We're walking back into life, so we're walking back into the substance of life and removing the overlay of the illusions of the fiction. So real estate is fictional. As far as I'm concerned, the royal aspect of people saying they're royalty is an illusion of the highest order. Yep. But it's one that billions of people bought into for a long time. That's part of the breakdown of the illusory world. Nonetheless, most of us are attached to the royal estate. In many ways, not just in what we call buying homes or land. Anything you register is going into the regal registry, the royal estate. So real estate is the overlay of the fiction. The land is the substance. That's where we talk about standing on the land, having the substance of land and law and the private estate and all of that. So nonetheless, you have to go through the fiction to get to the substance. I have a phrase that I've said for a long time. The only way out is in. There is no way out of this. We cannot get out of it. We must go into it, through it, and transform it back to life and the living substance. So he's using the word acquire. Well, that means I don't have it now, I want to acquire it tomorrow. That means you have to buy it. Unless somebody gives it to you as a grant of an estate, you have to buy it. What are you going to buy? You're going to buy the real estate title. You're going to buy the fiction first, and or you're already in a home or some land, and ostensibly you think you own it, but it's just part of the royal estate because the franchise that's on the title is part of that royal estate to begin with. And all you've done is volunteered to be the surety to do the debt service. And if you don't continue the debt service, they come along, take it back, and give it to another debtor. But either way, either you're already ostensibly have a relationship to the title, or you are going to acquire. Well, you either put your name on the line and took a debt, put down payment, or you're going to do that, or you have cash to pay for it in full. Now, when you pay for it with cash, Federal Reserve notes or otherwise, you're buying a title that belongs to the United States or the global military construct and the other corporations with its own private military script. So, again, it's complex. I'm not going to go into how you reverse that. You return that property to the United States, and under the military requirement in the international treaty of something called usufruct, you turn it around where you comply with their legal system and give unto Caesar what is Caesar's, return back to the United States or the UK or Australia what is theirs. And because then you've transformed and changed your status, now you penetrate below that to the substance of what's underneath, which is the land. And if you have the standing to do so, you claim it by claim of right and a freehold of that land that returns it to your proper standing and your own private estate. So I know what I just said is a little vague, but it takes the education to learn what that is. But the short version is simply that there are ways to convert it to a substantive hold of the land as opposed to title in the property or the real estate. And then he asked relation to future communities. Well, we need to go through this process. We need to get more and more people with the standing to do that, come together, pool their resources. It gets back to the nature of estates and having the standing to claim and hold the estate, all that kind of stuff. But this is where I know we want to go, is getting more people educated and actually move through this process so that we can do that, so we can have that land in a community and build it free of the restrictions of the insanity of the control, the codes and the things we're all aware of, especially in the last 10 years, that you can't have a garden, you can't have a goat, you can't drink raw milk. All that stuff. You can't do catchment of water. People have been thrown in jail because they're taking the water. That's because you're in their system and you're doing it because you're attached to their paper. And so this is the answer to get out of that, to really build real communities that that cannot be regulated that way.
Yeah, and once you've done that process by, if you've got standing to get the freehold back, that means they can't claim taxes off you anymore then. True.
Yeah. Because property tax is in the royal estate, the real estate, the use. See, this gets back to usufruct. Usufruct means the right to use the fruits of somebody else's labor. So when the military occupation came in, under military necessity and international treaties and other things, the military can take requisition for the military necessity, property, and persons to be applied to their military requirements. That sums up the entire world system. Why is the United States the military bully of the planet and has been for 100 years? Because we've been under military occupation since 1861. And everything by 1933 and onward was put under military usufruct. We created it. We're the creators. We created the value, the substance of the buildings and the farms and everything, but we did it within their military occupation. So under usufruct, they can use the fruits of our labor for their military necessity. To make another long story short, once you've corrected your status, we flip it around and we compel them to act as the trustee of the usufruct. Now they may own it. We return it to them, but we bind them to their own rules so that we have unregulated and unalienable standing to use that fruits of our labor without constraint and without their regulation. That's where we need to be so that we can return to living whole lives as far as, all the things that are illegal. You can't do this, you can't do that, you can't heal yourself, you can't drink raw milk, all those things.
Yeah, absolutely. Great, cool. That's really, really good. The third question coming from Zeitz is it fair to say that people gathering gold and silver nowadays, hoping to survive the impending collapse, are delusional? In 1933 or thereabouts, didn't the system force people into surrendering their precious metals or go to jail?
Uh-huh. Well, let's use a different word. Instead of delusional, how about disillusioned? Disillusion means dispelling the illusion. So my answer is no, they're not. But the second part of the question really reflects back to the misalignment of the understanding, because that is, in 1933, didn't the system force people into surrendering their precious metals or go to jail? Yes and no. It did not compel or force any people. People have standing and substance, but persons do not. Persons are artificial constructs. In fact, if you look in a Latin dictionary, you find person was a construct that when the Roman military took control and occupied countries, they applied or put on top of the captured people persons. Same thing as today. That's why a U.S. person is a fiction. It's an overlay for census and accounting and actuarial tables and monetizing. So if you go back to the actual documents, and this is from March 9th when the Emergency Banking Relief Act was put in effect through into June of 1933, many things were put in effect. One was in early April, FDR issued a proclamation, and then you go back to the Emergency Banking Relief Act, and you see that he was empowered to do anything by proclamation, and it was pre-approved by Congress. So he issued a proclamation that all persons in the United States must turn their gold into a Federal Reserve Bank on or before May 1st. Of course, May 1st is their high holiday in the reverse reality that some people call Satanism, which is pretty accurate as a matter of fact. Goes long back into history and the Egyptian systems and everything. Why May 1st? Why November 1st? And all of that. But you'll notice that many major events in the last 100 years have been done on May 1st. So May 1st was the day that all persons in the United States had to return their gold. Well, what is a person? Is that a people? No, it's not a people. It's an artificial person. Most people back then were not persons, but they thought they were because they thought the language was, people, person, it's the same thing. Most people were not in the United States, but they thought they were. So they complied. So the same basic framework applies. If you remain attached to the U.S. person, then if they come confiscate the gold, yes, gold, it applies to you. If you correct that status and you're a living man or woman on the land, you're a people, it doesn't apply to you. So I use the word disillusion because let's dispel the illusion of what has been overlaid that we've consented to by our ignorance and start waking up to the actual facts so that we can remove the illusion and pull the curtain back from the wizard and see that he has no real power.